Hey everybody, this is Andrew here at Tower, and today I'm going to show you how to fix a flat tire on your Tower Beach Bum or Beach Babe. So in front of me here I have a Beach Bum that has a flat tire here, so we are going to get that remedied and I will show you what to do. So the tools you'll need for this are pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You'll need a tire lever. This is probably our most important one. I usually like Pedro's. There's a lot of different brands out there for tire levers. You will need one of these. And then you will need either a 15mm wrench. This is the one we'll need today because we're doing the front. But if you're doing the rear, then you'll need an 18mm wrench. And for the rear, it's also handy to have a 10mm wrench just to help get the axle loose. You can also use an adjustable wrench like this, and then you won't have to worry about the sizing. You just dial it into the exact nut size. And then of course we do have our spare fresh tube, which will of course be a necessity to help change a flat tire. So we will get to it. So you're going to head up to your bike, and it's helpful in these situations to have your bike on like a stand or just kind of held up, just so you don't have to deal with the weight of the bike. For flat, and this is for most repairs. For flats, you can't always flip the bike upside down, sort of old school style, but if you do that, definitely be careful of especially the LCD display on here, but sort of all the things you have on your handlebars, because they'll be up against the ground. If you are going to do that, usually recommend laying like a towel or blanket down just to prevent any scratching. So without further ado, we'll get here. So just going to go on either side. Again, this is the front, so I'm using a 15mm wrench. We're just going to loosen these axle bolts to get the wheel off. And you got to loosen both sides. All right, and just like that, it comes right off. With your disc brakes, you don't have to worry about opening anything up. Disc rotor just slots right out. Just be sure you don't grab onto those brakes, because you could push the pistons out a little far. So now that the wheel is off of the bike, the first step we're going to do is, well, this one's completely flat, but yours at home may not necessarily be all without air. So what you want to do is get that valve cap off and just push on that pin in. Again, this one's completely flat. Yours might have some air in it. Just push that pin in. You can also use like a pen or a wrench. Just get that valve pushed out to let any air out. And then once all the air is out, just grab anywhere on the tire and just take both your thumbs and push in like that. And you'll see this inner bead just separated from the rim here. Now we're going to do that all the way around here. And it's also really helpful if you do both sides. See, and you can see the first one's always the most stiff, but then as you go around, it gets looser and looser. And the reason we do both sides is it'll help at the end step when we have to get this all back mounted. So you see, right now the tire is unseated from each side and can flop around all loosey-goosey. So now we're going to take that tire lever that I showed you earlier, and what we're going to do is we're going to hook it just underneath here, underneath that lip, and then you're going to pull it out. So now we can see that this section of tire is pulled out of the rim. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this tire lever, we're going to slide it to the side, and it's going to help us pull the rest of this tire out from inside the inside of that rim. So go all the way around, and then you're done. And the first section is always the most difficult. Once you get it going a little bit, it has a lot of give, and you can almost do it with your hands. But I always recommend using a tool, so you never know what's going to be inside of here. You might have something sharp, you might have exposed wire. And cuts on your hand are never good. So with that off, we just reach inside here, and we just grab the old tube, and we dispose of it. And these tubes can be recycled at rubber recyclers. They can be reused as straps and other things. But yeah, just dispose of this tire, do with it what you will. Now, the next step when we have a flat is we want to figure out what caused the flat, because it's no good to just take the old tube out and put a new tube in, because chances are whatever caused the flat is still in this tire. So it may just puncture the new tube, in which case we're back to square one. So with this one, I already know what happened is we had a tire liner installed here and it had a little bit of glue that hardened and made a little flat on the tube. Now what it may be, on yours, more than likely will be some sort of puncture. Most of the time they're plant thorns. Most people don't believe thorns can cause flats like this, but they absolutely can. Here in San Diego, the most common one are called goat heads, and they are absolutely everywhere. And it doesn't take, something super large to puncture that tube. Now these Schwalbe Fat Franks, they do have a pretty thick tread, and the tires do have sealant inside there. But nothing is 100% flat resistant, and at the end of the day they will still happen. So what you want to do at home is you're going to want to take either a rag or a washcloth. What you're going to do is you're just going to drag this on the inside of the tire. And the reason we do this is anywhere we have something puncturing through the tire, it'll snag on that cloth or rag as we're wiping it around. And wherever it snags, we know that we need to pull that spot out, because that is where the puncture's at. And the reason we use a cloth as well is you could use your hand, but again, if you have like a shard of glass or like a little tack or something in there, you drag your hand across it, that's going to hurt. So we use the cloth because then it'll snag on the cloth and not your hand. So we've pulled out the flat, we pulled out the thorn, we've figured out what's caused the flat. Now it is time to install the new tube. So we have our fresh tube here. So this is a 26 by 2.35 tire. So for the tube, 26 by 2.0 to 2.4. Tubes have a range. So this one is from a tire of 2.0 to 2.4. Ours is right in the middle of that. So this is the perfect tube. Then what you want to do is just get the tube all unwrapped. It'll probably come in some little box. So what you're going to do first, you're going to take that valve cap off. And the one thing I always like to do is I like to put a little bit of air into the tube first. You don't necessarily have to do this part, but it does help sort of long-term make sure nothing happens to the tube. And again, I don't inflate this all the way so it's full pressure, just enough air so that it takes its round shape. Because what can happen is if you just put it in all just sort of flat and floppy, is it can get twisted inside there, and while it probably will unwrap and fix itself, there's a chance it could pop the tube, and again, you're going to be back to square one. All right, so we got the tire with our one side hanging off, got our fully inflated tube. What we're going to do is we're going to find where the valve hole is. So we've got that valve hole right here. So I always like to start right here and get it in there. So once that's in there, then we're going to pull that tire over the tube, and then we're just going to go around and get this tube tucked into the tire all the way around. All right, and just like that, it's all tucked in. Now, one of the last steps you're going to want to do is basically what you did earlier in reverse. We pulled this tire out of the rim, now we're going to tuck it back in. I always like to start at the valve because that can usually be the most difficult part. So just kind of push it back with your thumbs, and then I like to push down a little bit here just to get it started, and then just gradually go all the way around with your thumbs, just sliding that tire over the rim. And now you want to be careful doing this to make sure, and that's another reason you inflate the tire a little bit, is you want to make sure that the tube doesn't get stuck here in between the tire and the rim. So we just go all the way around, and once you get here to the end, this is always going to be your most difficult part because you have a lot of resistance here. So it's usually helpful to kind of go from one side and push. And now, like what I'm experiencing now, is if it's mighty stiff and it's awful difficult to get. So when you're in this position where it's really stiff here, what you're going to do is you're going to see anywhere around the tire that it's sort of hooked into that bead, and you're going to press that bead into the center of the rim. And then see, like it's already happened, you sort of, once you push it in, so you sort of pinch either side here to the center. Once you get here, then it snaps on perfectly. So there you go, you got your tire all seated back on. And now for the final step, you just inflate the tire. So I do have my floor pump here. These are Schrader valves, so just about any bike pump you buy will work. It's the same as a car valve as well, so if you have like an air compressor or something, you can jet it up pretty quick. Now, of course, you want to be conscientious of your PSI. For these tires, the recommended PSI is between 30 and 65 PSI. If you are, like I myself, I'm a pretty big guy, so I usually am closer to that 65 PSI, usually somewhere like 50 or 55, just because I have more weight pressing down on there. And the lower the tire pressure, while it may make a comfy ride, does make your bike slightly more prone to punctures. So definitely something to be aware of when you are inflating. We're at about 40 PSI right now. Like I said, I usually like to go a little above that just to give myself a nice smooth ride. One of the things to also be careful of as well is to make sure that this bead is still tucked into the rim. What can happen occasionally if it's kind of positioned weirdly is if one part of it kind of pops out a little bit, as you inflate, the tube gets bigger and bigger in this one spot, and it can push out where it's at that opening, and a lot of times pop your tube, and it can be pretty startling. So be aware of that while you're pumping up your tire. All right, so we're at about 50 PSI right now. I think that's good for us. And you can see there, it's a nice looking wheel holding a lot of air. So just get that valve cap screwed back on. And then finally, we're gonna head back to the bike and get this slotted back on. So remember, the rotor is just gonna go right in. This rotor is just gonna go right into the brake calipers there. And you always want to push up to make sure that the wheel's in the dropouts all the way. Because if the wheel's not in the dropouts all the way, it'll be a little wonky in there. Your brakes may rub a lot, may not ride super well. But there you go. That's all there is to it. All there is to it. Your flat has been repaired. So thanks for joining us.